I'm currently on a small deserted island in the Nether, but every day the border around me will expand, revealing new islands to explore, including structures on them, and my goal is to survive here for 100 days. However, if I step outside this map now, I'll get the wither effect, and that's exactly what's happening, so as quickly as possible I must... No, I started burning. Luckily I have 1 heart left and I could get to gathering wood for a table and sticks to then make a pickaxe and 4 bowls. I decided to gather all the brown and red mushrooms on this island and then craft 3 stews. Thanks to that, I regenerated some of my hearts and noticed a basalt biome where a bastion was located. However, it was outside the circle for now, and I want to share that the new channel called Smiszek has just launched, where Minecraft videos will be posted weekly. Thanks to you, this channel exists, and the first video is already there where I survived 100 days on a snowy island, so after this video I invite you to Smiszek. While waiting for the circle to unlock, I spent time gathering blocks for a bridge later, so I used up my first pickaxe. And I had to go back to the crafting table to craft another one. And as I was digging again... What's this? Yo, there's a portal here! So I dug my way to a ruined portal, next to which was a chest from which I took all the loot. I went back to crafting to process the iron nuggets, but I only got 2 iron, with which I wasn't able to craft an iron pickaxe or a shield. Because I was missing 1 plank. Next, I went back for the chest and used up my entire pickaxe. Then I placed the chest on top and put away unnecessary items in it. Later, I decided to gather my entire tree to gain a few more blocks. And then everything that was on this island. I crafted the last possible pickaxe and after some time... and then the border expanded further. Thanks to that, I was getting closer to the bastion, and I decided to build a makeshift house out of netherrack and red leaves. Later, I added a crafting table, a chest, and some light there. Next, I noticed that the bastion started to unlock, so I began building a bridge to the other side. And as I arrived, I saw a piglin that I traded with. And when I got closer to the bastion, I saw a chest. I took all the items from it and stepped back slightly to start building huge stairs up to get to more chests. However, there were brutes near them. And unfortunately, it was still beyond the border, so I decided to go back to the base and craft an iron pickaxe there. Currently, I just waited for the border to expand and then headed to the bastion. A brute immediately lunged at me and fell down, and then I knocked him even further and killed a piglin. Next, I got to the first chest, which had a ton of items that I took, and luckily I found golden carrots, because as you can see, I was totally out of hunger. And I'm playing on hardcore and can die without food. I put on a chest plate and a better hat. Later, I jumped down to take some items from the chest, kill a piglin, then the rest of the loot from the chest, and then I ran to the next one. And there's a diamond pickaxe. If I'd known about it, I wouldn't have crafted the iron pickaxe, but then I looted another chest and the border started hitting me. But I was able to take the rest of the items. With all the new loot, I went back to the base to put the items in the chest, and then back to the bastion to take the chests. Then I dug some blocks from the bastion and noticed a new island. Yes, an island with blue trees. Thanks to this, I'll soon have the opportunity to have a larger amount of wood, because right now I have 0 and I went back to base to place some chests. I spent my next bit of free time digging out a really massive room. That'll come in handy in the future. Because of that, I had more blocks to build my way to another island with blue trees. I started running around it, but I didn't see anything on it, so I decided to gather wood until my axe broke and I made a new iron one. I gathered more and even more wood. And then I saw this. What's this? A pigman spawned on a strider? So I decided to kill 2 pigmen and head back to base, where I crafted a fishing rod, then added a blue mushroom and made a warped fungus on a stick. Next, I went back to the strider and killed the pigman on it. And thanks to that, I unlocked my new friend. I'll name you Maxiusz. I decided to head back to my base with him and made him his own pen, and then I made fences to enclose him. Of course, he had lava here, so he'd feel his best, and it's with him that I'll now be discovering tons of new islands. But I'd like to ask you to boost this video for Maciusz and for the greatest growth of both channels, Śmieszniejszy and Smieszek. Later, I went back again to gather some more wood and then to my base to tear down this makeshift house because I wanted to build a mini bastion to live in. So I had to go to a real bastion where I started mining a ton of blocks. And then, when I had enough of them, I first made an outline, then the walls, stairs, a second floor where I put fences to be able to watch my world from here, and finally the floor. Then I made a passage downstairs and placed stairs and then chests. I visually improved my entrance even more, and next I moved my loot chests, added furnaces and sorted the items in the chests. I added even more chests and the items were sorted. At the very end I added doors and then a ton of light in different places to make it look better, and so my hut was officially ready. However, I had 17 iron in total, from which I made a shield, a chest plate and pants. I took some blocks with me and hopped on Matsiush to set off in search of the next island. After a while, I discovered a netherrack island. I ran around it for a bit, but there were only a few mushrooms here, which will be super useful because, as you can see, I was running out of food. I decided to get on Matsiush and drop him off at my base to then build a bridge to that island until I finally finished it and started gathering mushrooms, but some pigs attacked me. Of course I killed them, and so I got a little bit of meat, but then I started a big mushroom hunt. And so I gathered all the mushrooms I could. And okay, I think I took all the mushrooms that were here. So then I killed another pig and went back to the hut to put away the mushrooms and cook the meat. And when I took it, I went for Matsiush again to explore the area even more. And so I found a quartz island, which was huge. However, there was a ghast on it, which I shot once and then went back to base to make a bridge later. But I ran out of blocks, which I mined on the netherrack island. And so I finally finished the bridge to the quartz island. I decided to gather a ton of quartz from it, which I mined for a very long time. But I needed quartz for my new room. I finally got 5 stacks of quartz blocks, which I took back to the base. Then I went to my mine, where I destroyed the whole portal, as I wanted to build a room here for blocks from all the islands to keep them as souvenirs. Next, I went to craft only 3 item frames because I didn't have any more leather, and I put them on the walls. Then I started the big construction of the room until it was almost ready, but I went back to the island for a few blocks, which I then took back to the room and finally added them. This is what our room looked like for now, but as the video goes on, it's going to get more and more interesting. Currently, I went to the basalt island for blackstone, then to the island with blue trees for a blue leaf, then to the netherrack island for a mushroom. Then I went back to the base to drop off the items I'd collected. Right now I wanted to discover more islands, so I made a bunch of new mushroom stews and took Matsiush with me on the journey. After a while I discovered a new island. Oh, there's another island. It was a magma island where there was magma everywhere, and on top of that there was a ruined portal here. And there wasn't much of anything interesting in the chest. I also collected a gold block and started looking around, but I didn't see anything else here. I then returned to the base with Matsiush because later I built, as always, a bridge to the new island, and I decided to also collect some of that magma, as it might come in handy someday. Later I went back to the base to drop off the items and set off in search of another island, and I even found it after a while. And it was a soul sand island. On it, there was a lot of fire and some bone blocks, which I decided to collect, and I did the same with the soul sand. Next, I started building a bridge to the magma island to connect them, and I went back to Matsiush to head back to my base again. Then I made even more mushroom stews and set off on a journey again, and after a while, a ghast even spawned, which I managed to defeat, and another one's shooting at me. Okay, you're down. That's how I defeated another ghast and discovered a gravel island where there was a fortress. I decided to park my friend and then build around him so he wouldn't escape, and I built my way up to the fortress. That's how I discovered a blaze spawner and killed the first blaze. Then I took the loot from the chest and later made a diamond axe. And I kept looking around until I found another blaze spawner, where I killed a blaze again and dug out the blocks under the spawner to finally farm 6 blaze rods. Next, I managed to find a new chest, in which I found 4 iron and as many as 5 nether warts. Then, while battling a wither skeleton, my shield suddenly broke, and on top of that I didn't have any food. So I had to go get Matsiush to make our way back home peacefully. Next, I dropped off the items, made some stews and crafted a shield. Later, I went to the magma island to build a bridge to the gravel island. Then when I entered the fortress, 2 wither skeletons lunged at me, and when I killed them even... What the? I got a skull. There was a super low chance of that. But it was pretty cool. Then I ran around the fortress and killed wither skeletons to get as much coal as possible because I'll need it very soon. When I ran out of stews, I decided to go back to the base and made more stews, but I didn't have many mushrooms left, so I took coal from the chest and made a new shield. Right now, I wanted to build a hoglin farm to get meat and leather for item frames. I decided to make a small wooden bridge from my main house, and then I started laying the floor, but I ran out of wood. So I headed to the island with blue trees and collected a few more logs there, which I took back to the base to craft some ladders, which I added to my farm, and then I finished the floor. Next, I added fences all around my farm and added a drop point for hoglins where I'll be able to kill them. At the very end, all that was left was making torches and adding soul sand in the right places where I added blue mushrooms. And I added torches everywhere, and so my farm was practically ready. For that, I went to the base to make a hopper, and I was missing 2 iron to make a bucket into which I'd pour lava, and so I made an automatic hoglin farm, so I decided to take gold with me to the netherrack island and traded my gold. I thought I'd get iron, but unfortunately it didn't work out. Next, I went to the island with blue trees and gathered a few logs there, which I turned into wood with which I went to the farm. Then I had to make a huge pillar upwards, using wood and ladders, until I reached the very top. Well, okay, and really all that's left for us is waiting and hoping that a hoglin spawns there. After a fairly long wait, a total of 2 hoglins spawned, but I only got 3 meats and 0 leather from it. I was totally disappointed by this, because it worked mega poorly, but at least I added a few item frames in our basement and went to the quartz island to get 1 quartz. Then to the magma island to mine 1 magma, next to the soul sand island to get 1 soul sand. And at the very end, I collected gravel from the gravel island. Then I went to my base to put away all the newly collected blocks, and then in front of my house I added a black skeleton head to make it look nicer. However, I was missing a port here, so I went to the magma island, but a pig wanted to stop me, which I killed and mined a few magma blocks for myself. Next, I went back to the base and took a few useful blocks for the port from the chest, and later I decided to build it in front of my house. First I made a longer bridge and added crying obsidian as supports, and then I placed fences, and at the end of the bridge I added a larger fork and ran further fences there. And I added more crying obsidian, and it had a mega cool vibe. However, I had no way to craft boats, so I decided to build them by hand, and I made as many as 2. And that's how the whole port looked. Later, I went to the house to put away items and crafted the last 2 possible soups, because I was missing mushrooms, so when I saw that, I went to the Netherrack island, where I killed hoglins, gathered the last mushrooms that were here, and went back to the house again. I crafted more soups for myself and crafted a new item frame because I wanted to go discover another island now. However, before that I went back to the Netherrack island where I gathered a lot of netherrack, which will be useful to me anyway. And by the way, I killed a few pigs again. Then I went back to the house again, crafted item frames which I added downstairs, and they were ready to discover more islands. So I set off on a long adventure and I found a Twisting Vines island which looked mega, similar to a regular bamboo island but in a nether style. I started circling it like that, and I found a place to stop, and I even saw the border, but I parked Makyush like that and went to explore here. Running around this island, I felt like I was on a bamboo island. I gathered some twisting vines and killed an enderman from whom I got a pearl. It also dropped some green netherrack which I took with me. Later I started looking around this island, so I killed an enderman and then climbed up the vines. I didn't see any structures here, so I decided to kill a few more endermen, and then I got back on Matyush to build a bridge to that island. Once the bridge was ready, I was also ready to quickly head back and put some meat in the furnace, make more soup and put away my items. Next, I crafted another shield and combined 2 old shields, and then I set off on an adventure to find more islands. After a while, I found an island with red trees, and I even locked up my strider for a moment. Wait, what? Okay, hey, I didn't notice this. There's some huge bastion here. I seriously didn't see it, but since it was already here, I had to build my way up. But suddenly a brute jumped down on me and almost killed me. But luckily, I managed to escape thanks to the blocks. Okay, I don't know how I survived that. Next, I started building my way up and found 2 chests, and one of them had a diamond pickaxe with fortune 3. And I took the rest of the items. I also took 2 lanterns, killed a brute and a piglin, then a lamp and a new chest, which didn't have anything super great in it. Later, after looting the chest at the top, I decided to go down to collect the gold and headed all the way down to the treasure room. At the very bottom, I killed the piglin and got to the chests. I found diamond boots, a diamond sword, and 2 ancient debris. In the second chest, I took diamond leggings and a diamond chest plate with protection 4. That's how I got a full diamond set and collected all the gold blocks. Next, I got to another chest with some cool loot and decided to build up to take items from another chest, and I even found 17 golden carrots. Then I collected some lamps because they'll be very useful for my house. And I was finally ready to leave this bastion and then go to meet my friend Makyush. Then I went back to my base and started putting all the items in chests, and then a pig suddenly attacked me, which I killed. Later I went to a netherrack island to get some blocks there, and then I started building a bridge to the island with red trees, until I reached it and decided to take a red leaf as a souvenir. Next, I reached my little house, took 1 twisting vine from the chest and placed it in an item frame, and I did the same with the red leaf. Next, I wanted to make netherite armor, but I was out of fuel in the furnace, so I went to gather some wood and then smelted it. Finally, the ancient debris, and then I crafted 2 netherite ingots. Then I made a smithing table, which I placed above the furnaces, and made a netherite sword and a netherite helmet. Unfortunately, I didn't have any more netherite, but I crafted a bucket and filled it with lava. Then I went to my hoglin farm and placed a hopper there. Then I crafted trapdoors, which I obviously added here, and finally I poured the lava. Once the farm was ready, I went to the house to swap the mushrooms for lamps, but suddenly a hoglin spawned, fell into the lava, and burned, so the farm was working. But when I ran to the farm to check the hopper, it turned out to be empty. And unfortunately, for now, this farm will work super slowly, but once I get more iron and craft hoppers, it will be much better. I finally went to add lamps at the top on the ground floor at the very bottom, and I even added a bunch of those lamps to the port, and it looked even better, and I used the last 2 lamps in front of the house. When everything was ready, I got on Mashiush and set off in search of more islands. And after a while, we've got another island. It was a huge gold island, and I parked there and built a shelter for my strider. I ran around it for a bit. Look at how it looks. It looked super cool, and I decided to use this island to gather as much gold as possible. So I started my mining. Thanks to Fortune 3, which I got in the Bastion, it was super efficient. So after mining for a bit, I found some stone, which I decided to mine, and then further and further I mined gold until I managed to get 64 gold blocks in total. Next, I went back to Macius and decided to build a bridge from this island, but I ran out of blocks, so I went back to Macius and headed to the Netherrack island because piglins spawned there more often, and I wanted to get a full enchanting table now, but for that I'll need 45 books in total, which I can already get from trading with piglins. Later I gathered some netherrack, which I used to build around Macius, and then I turned all the gold into ingots. Next, I dug out the blocks under a piglin and trapped him here, and then I threw another piglin in there. Then I threw them some gold to trade, and after that I let another piglin in again. Next, I made a chest where I put the items. Later, I dug a few holes to pick up the traded items more easily, and for the next hour, I basically just traded and traded with them, putting the loot into chests and turning iron nuggets into regular iron. Next, after as many as 64 gold blocks, I only got 1 book, and I don't know what the odds were, but I was super unlucky. So for now, we'll give up on the idea of gathering 45 books. However, all the loot from the piglins looked pretty cool. For now, I took the most important and best items with me, and the thought of making a full level 30 enchanting table remained just a dream for the future. Next, I took Macius with me and headed to my base. Later, I put away my gathered items and headed to the island with red trees where there was a bastion that I entered and decided to check all the chests because I was missing 2 diamonds for the enchanting table. In the end, there was nothing interesting in the first one, but in the second one, and there are diamonds. Okay, we've got them. We also have a disc, actually, and we don't need the rest of the stuff. Next, I kept running and running, but finally I could build my way up from here, then onto the bridge, and all the way back to the Netherrack island, from which I took some loot and returned to the base. And by the way, I remembered to put away the gold nugget from the gold island. Then I put the items in the chest and left the mini bastion to go back for some cobblestone and then back to the base again. And then I took 2 books from the chest and threw the cobble into the furnace to smelt into stone. Once the cobble smelted into stone, I decided to craft a grindstone. Next, I placed it on the ground and could turn my gathered soul speed books into regular books. And thanks to that, we have regular books, so we can easily craft an enchanting table. That's how I got the enchanting table, which I wondered where to place, and finally I chose a spot near our items from the islands. After choosing the spot, all that was left was to build the room, and I used quartz blocks for that. But I ran out of them, so I went back to the quartz island where I got the missing quartz, which I then used to finish the room, and I think it had a super cool vibe. Next, I decided to set off on another journey, and after a while I found this. And here's an entire island built out of lava and fire. It was a lava island, but I didn't mind because I drank a fire resistance potion, jumped off Maciush, and decided to look around here. I couldn't see anything from above, but I was hoping for a chest, though I kept falling under the lava. After a moment, I hit the fire and it all fell apart. With 1 hit, I destroyed all the fire. Besides the magma cubes, I didn't see anything else here, so I threw a pearl toward the strider and hopped on. Later, from the island with red trees, I started building a bridge to the lava island, and once it was ready, I set off further and soon found a mushroom island. It was divided by lava, but at least there were tons of mushrooms here. I decided to gather as many mushrooms as possible so I could craft mushroom stew in the future. However, as I was heading home, I looked up and saw this. What the? Hey, okay, I looked up and suddenly saw an island and it's way up at the very top. What's going on? But I didn't have any blocks to build up there, so I went back home to grab a fire resistance potion and a bunch of blocks. Then I crafted 6 new item frames and headed downstairs. Alright, first we can swap this island for regular netherrack, because the mushroom one is actually in a different spot. Then I added a lava bucket for the lava island and then a mushroom for the mushroom island. Next, I placed more item frames and went to the island with blue trees where I started building a long bridge. Finally, I saw the island above me and started building my way up. It was a Weeping Vines island, but it was upside down. Once I built all the way to the top, I decided to climb onto it and it was super cool. Then I broke a few Weeping Vines and the effect was really neat. After gathering some, I threw a pearl and drank a potion, then some pigs attacked me, but they weren't a problem. Then I went back to the island with blue trees, gathered a few, and headed to our hoglin farm. And it turned out there were 6 pieces of meat and 1 leather there. Next, I decided to build a nether garden, so I went to the chest for some items and started building by my house. Then I made the floor, and next I added fences and started, decorating the place as much as possible, adding various plants and finally a tree. I think it looked pretty good and I went to put away items, make a bunch of stew and combine 2 shields. Next I decided to make a bridge to the mushroom island, but I ran out of blocks so I threw a pearl and gathered tons of new blocks to finish my bridge later. I also remembered that I hadn't added a block from the upside down Weeping Vines island. I went to my decoration room so I placed it now. Later on, when I was finally ready, I set off even further and after a while I found a huge obsidian island which looked really awesome. Just look at how it looks. You can see that these spike-like things are built right from the edges of the obsidian. Then I ran around the island some more, but there was nothing new to find here, though I really liked the look of the island itself. Later I decided to make a bridge for this island, and when I finished it I got on Mateusz to set off even further. I didn't know what it was at first, but after a moment it turned out to be a piglin island. Look at all this gold and so many piglins too. I didn't have any gold pieces on me, but I started building a bridge to get to the gold, but then I fell into the lava and later threw a pearl and got super lucky. I survived in the end, because at one point I was down to half a heart. Once I stopped burning, I started building and bridging my way to the gold again. And when I got there, I mined 1 gold block, made golden boots out of it and put them on. They were still quite mad at me though, but I really wanted to mine as much gold as I possibly could, so I did, and I even found a rare piglin head. When I finally had over 100 gold blocks, I went down to dig right under them and then threw all the gold to them. I wanted to get 44 books from trading with the piglins, which I'll use to craft bookshelves for level 30 enchanting. After many trades, there were fewer piglins here because they kept killing themselves, but at least I got 2 books that way. I also noticed that after that fight, my armor set was almost broken, but now I decided to collect as many gold blocks as possible to trade later. I killed the piglins and crafted iron, and then I went to the trees and gathered some wood. Next, I dug a new hole and crafted some chests and then some hoppers. I carefully placed them in the hole and crafted even more chests. Then I made a path to the hoppers and added chests there. And I added chests there. This was so the piglins would drop items there immediately and not become aggressive when I opened chests so they wouldn't end up killing themselves again. Just in case, I also went back for Mateusz to build them in later. All that was left was to transport the piglins into these holes, so I did the first, then the second and third, but sadly 2 died. Later I brought even more piglins and the whole system started working. I also decided to make an iron set so my diamond one wouldn't break by accident. Then they just kept trading, and I was putting the books into a separate chest. It took over an hour in total, but all the loot in the chest looked really cool, and most importantly, I finally got the 44th book. Yes, I got it. I got the book. I could finally leave, but first I took all the books I could, then I went to the Strider and headed to the base. Then I put the books into the grindstone to process them, and for now I had 32 of them. I left them in a chest and went back to the Piglin Island to get more items and then the items from the bottom. Then back home to carefully store the items in chests. Then I processed more books and placed the Piglin head as a souvenir from the island. Next, I went back there again to get even more items and headed home once more, put away the water bottles and then the blackstone. Then I returned to the Piglin Island again to gather wood from there and then take even more blackstone from the chests. Then I started building a bridge from the Piglin Island to make it easier to get here without Mateusz. Then I got the Strider and went home. Then I put away the blackstone again and processed the wood. Then I took the books from the chests, made a bunch of new soups and finally crafted 15 bookshelves. Next I went down to the enchanting area and dug out the blackstone to place all the bookshelves there and the last bookshelf. And there we go, level 30 enchanting. I was super happy with that, but I didn't have any lapis so I couldn't enchant any items for now. Then I took a few potentially useful items and set off on a long journey. And after a while I found Fire Island, parked Mateusz and started looking around. There was fire everywhere here, both red and blue, and I didn't see anything else here. However, I found another deserted island, this time a fire one. And I decided to build another bridge, and it was seriously mega long. Next, I went back for Maciusz and finally back to my little house. I decided to take a fire charge and place it in an item frame as a trophy for the fire island. Then I set off on another journey, and after a while I found 2 small islands of blue and red warts. When I stepped on it, the piglins started hitting me, but I noticed my armor set was breaking, so I crafted an iron set. Next, I made myself a crafting table and made a hoe, and then I gathered some of those warts. Next, I built a bridge to the second island. And finally, after a short fight, I dealt with the hoglins. And then I gathered more blue wart. Once I had a stack of them, I decided to build another bridge until I reached the piglin island. Later, I went back to the base with Maciusz, dropped him off, and then crafted 8 item frames and added them at the very bottom. But I didn't forget to add the warts and placed another 3 item frames. Later, I went to craft an anvil, which I took down to the enchanting room. And with the last 2 diamonds, I repaired my boots and pants. I came up with an idea to make a lab and started building it across from the enchanting room. Then I built this room exactly the same way as the one with the enchanting table. Later I added the first as well as the second brewing stand, then 5 chests next to each other and 2 at the very entrance. Then I went back to my chests for soul sand and brought it back down and placed it in this room with warts on top. Later I added some more slight changes, and that's how the whole room looked. After that, I moved the water and fire resistance potions into the chest downstairs. Then I added 3 bottles to the brewing stand and powered them with blaze powder. I gathered 2 nether warts from the farm and added them to the brewing stand, then added the blaze powder until finally, and we officially have strength potions. Unfortunately, I didn't have glowstone for strength too, but at least I could sort the potions in the chests better. However, I left 1 strength behind. Later, I went upstairs to get the items needed for the next expedition. I decided to put stone in to smelt into smooth stone, until finally I made slabs and crafted an armor stand. I decided to add it by the enchanting table and left the helmet and chestplate, which were badly damaged, and for looks I also added iron parts. Later I set off on my furthest adventure and found a huge island built of shroomlight. I parked my Maciusz and it was the largest of all the islands. It looked mega massive here, but I didn't see anything else here, so I went back where I came from and built another bridge. When I finished it, I went back to the base, where I put the gathered shroomlight away as a souvenir. And then I jumped on my Maciusz again, and I was keen on finding more islands. However, after a very long trip, I found absolutely nothing here.